Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Getting Hammered. We don't usually do guests and straight news reports. However, I felt like this story was getting overlooked. So a little intro to my interview with Matt Van Swol, who is a Western North Carolina citizen from a small town outside of Asheville, who's been on the ground doing work there. Just to preface it, I'll give you guys a readout on where Western North Carolina is right now. In late September of 2024, Hurricane Helene made landfall in Florida. You guys remember that? But it did most of its damage, biblical in scale, in Western North Carolina. Historic flooding affected 30-plus counties. It wiped out entire towns, infrastructures, devastating Swannanoa, Canton, Chimney Rock, Spruce Pine, parts of Asheville, among many others. The North Carolina State Climate Office at NC State University reported at one point from a weather station in a state park 24.4 inches of rainfall during the storm. Just insane stuff. There are 104 dead on the official list, though that number is somewhat in doubt because of the chaos in the area, which was without power, cell, internet service for sometimes weeks after the storm, making rescue, recovery, reporting very difficult. You don't hear much about it in national media. I kept waiting for major news anchors to be in their waders in the water there, and I just didn't see them. But the situation remains dire for many families in this affected region 4 months later. Civilians and nonprofit agencies report that they've been filling a vacuum left by government services, and they feel that the region is at best carelessly neglected and at worst intentionally ignored and subjected to such incompetence that it's just beyond the pale from government help. All this came to a head this week when thousands of families' FEMA hotel vouchers ran out as a winter storm approached the area. I guess FEMA didn't plan for winter. They were on the verge of being kicked out into the snow when public outcry and nonprofits on the ground pried several last-minute extensions from FEMA. Without that outcry, it would not have happened. Though North Carolina's senators are at least now paying attention, the new governor of the state a little more iffy, as you'll hear in this interview, the problem's far from solved, and government attempts to help in Western North Carolina would be comically bad if their results weren't so tragic. I talked to Matt Van Swol, a Western North Carolina resident and father of 3 who has been volunteering to help those affected since September. He's holding down his regular job, being a family man, and doing near, frequent on-the-ground work since then. He and others on the ground are desperate to get help and attention. We appreciate their work, and I hope that this interview helps a little bit. By the way, some of the folks you can follow on X if you are interested in what's happening on the ground there, and I hope the Trump administration will have a person who is high profile and interested in what's going on the ground there. In the meantime, you can follow Matt Van Swol at Matt_Van Swol, VANSWOL. You can follow Sean Hendricks at the Sean Hendricks, who has been doing a bunch of work there and has a nonprofit called Operation Shelter. Emergency RV at Emergency RV has been on the ground as well, doing a lot of this work, and at Samaritan's Purse, which is Franklin Graham's organization that is based in Western North Carolina and is always good at doing on-the-ground disaster work. So with that rather long preface, I give you Matt Van Swol to tell you the story about how things are going on the ground in Western North Carolina. Matt, you are one of these people who one of the things I like about X is that it reveals people who are on the ground and you can get reliable information from when you might not be otherwise getting reliable information from, say, non-existent FEMA briefings. So you kind of popped to the top of my feed and I was trying to pay attention to Western North Carolina. But tell me how you came to be there and how you came to be doing work on the ground post-Helene.
Yeah, so I was actually in Charleston when I met my wife who lived in Asheville at the time. So when we got together, I actually moved from Charleston to Asheville. I've lived here for 6 years now.
Okay.
So relatively, semi-new to the area. We moved from Asheville a little bit further out into the mountains, a little bit more on the outskirts to a place called Weaverville, which is honestly my favorite place on earth.
Oh.
And people here are incredible. My wife and I have this saying every time something like remarkable happens, we call it like a Weaverville moment, where like someone will like pay for your groceries when you're just standing in line, or you'll like walk down Main Street and there's like an old couple that are being sweet to each other. It's just like, it's one of the, like these magical places just kind of tucked away in the mountains. And yeah, our kids love it here. Our kids have great friends. We got 3 kids, 13, 11, and 4-year-old, and they love it here as well. We were not really impacted by Helene in the sense that we still have a home. Nothing of ours got damaged, but we were definitely one of the last people in the kind of Asheville area to get power back. So we were without power for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. If you go back further in my Twitter feed, you can see like videos from that time. But essentially, for the first 4 to 5 days, we just did not have any clue what had occurred. We kind of were hunkered down in our home without power, without cell service, without like any idea what was going on. We would just kind of hear like things from people that had driven their cars out saying like everything is gone, and we were like, what does that mean? And I tell this to people because it's so funny thinking back to them, but like we were totally convinced that like Florida didn't exist anymore. Like there was no chance we thought that Asheville or WNC got hit the hardest. There was like not a possibility in our minds. We thought like we got like, possibly the outskirts of what was like a much worse storm that we just didn't know about. So, when we finally got out, we drove to Charlotte one morning with a woman who had been basically hunkering down at our house. She had just had twins.
Oh, wow.
Like within a couple of months, and she ran out of water. And that's when things started to get like really scary, because people started running out of water day 3, day 4, and she didn't have water to make formula. And we had filled up our tubs. So we still had some water. So on day 4, we were like, all right, we got to get out of here. And so like the morning of day 5, we left and went to Charlotte, drove to Charlotte. I emptied all of our gas cans that I usually use for the mower into our car. I was just like, I just pray to God that, we can get out of here.
See if we can get somewhere, right?
Yeah. So we got out to Charlotte and we got like cell service for the first time and just could not believe what we were seeing. And so we stayed in like Charlotte for one day, went to my parents in Greenville, South Carolina for one day, bought a generator, got Starlink, got everything that we knew our neighbors would need, and then drove back and hunkered down until, the lights came back on weeks later. But we had like a generator running power to a couple people's houses. We had what we called like the internet cafe. So like we were the only people in our neighborhood with Starlink. So everyone was coming over to our house, just like trying to get in touch with friends and family to let them know they were okay. It was wild. I mean, it was completely wild. But, after things started settling down from like the disaster front, the efforts for cleanup and for people to get homes was just enormous. And we saw, I don't know if you know who this is, but Sean Hendricks, who was like literally airdropping Starlinks to fire departments with like Trump.
Yes.
We hooked up with him because he actually ended up staying at our house a couple of times. And we were like, dude, you're doing so much. We're here, like, on the ground in Western North Carolina. How can we help you? And he was like, well, how about you take a look at this intake form that I've got? We looked at it and there were so many people on it that needed help. And so we just kind of got started from there probably 2.5, 3 months ago, just trying to help as many people as we could that were on that list. And then I don't know where we ended up.
Yeah, so it's so harrowing. Just the 3 weeks without power is harrowing on its own, and it's so much more beyond that. The list, and I know it's not complete, stands at 104 people who have died during the storm, but a lot of that is uncertain. I'm sure there are still people missing. The part of what's interesting to me about this is the relative lack of information, and we're going to get into like the current problems that are happening right now. But because no one could get or there could get very few videos out, very few photos out. You guys couldn't get information about what was happening. And there was not a lot of media going to the site. There was a bit of a black hole here for just information until the Sean Hendricks and the Greg Biffles of the world started publicizing what they were doing.
Yeah, 100%. I'll tell you right now, one of the most infuriating things I remember from that time period was we were listening. We only had a ham radio and then a radio in our Tesla, which ended up being like the world's battery bank for all of the phones in our neighborhood. But anyways, we would like sit in the Tesla and listen to the radio briefings, and everyone was telling us to go to a website, and we were like, "Yo, we don't even have cell service. How in the hell can we go to a website to get more information when like there's no power, no water, no internet, no cell service?" It's just unbelievable. But yeah, I think, that particular aspect was one of the strangest parts about this whole thing, is that nobody knew anything about what was going on. It was entirely word of mouth, which obviously set off like a lot of panic in people trying to just glean as much information from trusted sources, which were just people on the ground, as possible. And, a lot of it ended up being not true. And some of it ended up being like way worse than you could ever imagine,
Right.
but there was definitely a black hole of information at that time. Yeah.
In your current capacity, are you working a job plus running around on the ground and trying to help people still at this point, several months out?
Yeah. I've worked at a security company, consumer security company called Wise. We make like smart cameras, smart light bulbs, smart plugs, anything smart in your home, we make it. I'm the head of our subscriber growth program over there. We just launched an AI product yesterday. So yeah, I that's what I'm trying to juggle and trying not to get fired from while I'm, helping people out here. And I'm thankful that they gave me a lot of time off at the beginning of the storm, like 30 days off, and offered to pay for like an Airbnb and stuff. They were really wonderful to me. But yeah, I'd say like the amount of juggling happening every day is becoming like completely unmanageable. Especially now that like things seem to be getting like worse on the FEMA front versus what I was hoping would be better. They just seem to have just deteriorated.
Yeah, so let's talk about what happened this week, which is that people who had vouchers for temporary housing who were in hotels, which is, not ideal, but it's not your home, but it's good to have something, and it's not a temporary home, but it's good to have a hotel room. Their vouchers, according to the FEMA plan, were to run out at the exact time that a severe winter storm was going to hit Western North Carolina. One of the sad complications of this has been that people couldn't rebuild or get back in homes just because of the timeline before winter hit Western North Carolina. So that's just dangerous in and of itself. But FEMA, seemingly not accounting for winter, decided that these vouchers were done and that people would be out of these hotels. Is that a correct telling of basically what happened earlier this week?
Yeah, but it's actually even worse than that. So you're correct that like they were going to expire, but I think people don't quite understand like why are there so many people in these hotels? Like
Right.
why haven't they gone now? Why haven't they started a rebuilding process?
Well, and the number that were going to be kicked out was about 3,500, I think, but there are thousands more than that who are in the program still.
Oh yeah. And I think it's very interesting to like read into why there's so many people just sitting in hotels in Western North Carolina. But the people we talked to that were getting kicked out of hotels seemingly had very little or no connection with FEMA whatsoever. So they were trying to get in touch with FEMA and they could not, or they had gotten in touch with FEMA and FEMA was like, please hold, and that was the majority of the people. Now, a lot of the people were, trying to get their homes inspected by FEMA 4 months later, and FEMA still hadn't come out to inspect their homes. They were kicking them out of hotels anyways, which was crazy. Or we talked to another family that had FEMA come out to their home. They had done an inspection. insurers had done an inspection, and FEMA and the insurance company were still kind of duking it out. And they were going to get kicked out of the hotel, even though FEMA and insurance still hadn't made up their minds on like what to do. So FEMA, I feel like, has dropped the ball in multiple areas because there are definitely some people in hotels right now that should go back home because their homes are habitable and FEMA has done an inspection and those people can go. But FEMA has dropped the ball on so many of these inspections and trying to get temporary housing units into Western North Carolina. They have been horrendous on that front.
Right.
There's at least, I thought I saw a Ted Budd post this, but there's 1,600 people that have requested temporary housing units, and they've only delivered 93 in 4 months.
Oof. Yeah.
So that timeline is really rough. And that kind of tells you why there's so many people in hotels, is that FEMA really does a horrible job. And I think people are figuring this out now, just based on how bad they've been on just communication recently. But FEMA seems to do a horrible job of actually doing the work on the ground. Like when it comes to handing out money to people, especially contractors, boy, they love to tout how much money they've just like handed out to North Carolina. But when it comes to like a metric of success that isn't money, that is actually helping people, they are just, they cannot pull it off.
Well, and one of the complications seems to be that in order to get moving on rebuilding or relocating or whatever it is, and to get yourself out of the temporary housing hotel situation, so much of it is dependent on physically someone from FEMA showing up, or and you being dependent on whenever that happens. Or as Chris Swol said on Fox News Sunday to Shannon Bream, this shocked me, is that, I'll read her quote. She said, what we do is we call everybody. We call them every 2 weeks to check in on where they're at, what their status is, and is their home able to be occupied again. But one of the biggest things is when we call them, if we don't hear from them, the only thing we can do is assume that they've been back in their home. One of the things I want to make sure, if somebody has received that notification, but they haven't talked to somebody at FEMA and their situation is still in need, they are still eligible. We just need to get them to get in touch with us so we can talk to them. Everybody's going to have a unique circumstance. Everybody's going to have a unique situation. Okay. You're in a disaster zone. You have a family in a hotel room, and you're trying to get someone from FEMA on the phone lest they assume you don't need help anymore? This seems totally backwards.
It seems crazy.
Yes.
Well, it seems crazy. And it also, I actually have a soft spot for FEMA on this phone situation because LA, I'm sure, is calling,
Right.
And I'm sure their call centers are overrun. There's no doubt in my mind. In fact, we know this because people from Western North Carolina send us screenshots of them being on hold with FEMA for 3.5 to 6 hours.
Oh.
And then they hang up or get disconnected.
Of course.
Or, God only knows what happens in those hours. So, hey, why don't you just recognize that you've got a bit of a problem with the phone system because so many people are calling and say, hey, we'll just extend these hotel vouchers until things in Southern California die down. Or here's a radical thought. We'll take a couple of our 20,000 employees and just send them out to the hotels to where the people are that we have clearly put in the hotels and go talk to the people face to face.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be better? I mean, they have 20,000 employees. They can't send a couple out to each hotel. They say they have 1,300 people still in North Carolina somewhere. They're probably miles away.
Right.
Why not just send those people out to go talk to the actual people you've put in the hotels? And that way you can have a face-to-face conversation about what is actually needed. But God forbid they do that. They'd rather just work remotely or something. I don't even know.
No, and in absence of that, what happens is that nonprofits, and you can tell me the names of a couple of them so that people can support them, are going door to door to the hotels that FEMA has designated that people are living in to pay at the front desk to extend these families because they can't get responsiveness from FEMA. So someone's doing that on the ground work and picking up the slack, but it's not FEMA. When, as you say, you're correct. You could send out a couple FEMA employees and have them do this work.
That's right. Yeah. And I will say Mercury One, which is Glenn Beck's charity, I think
Right.
he started it, has done, I mean, they have been the hero of the past, I don't know, 5 days or so. I believe Glenn Beck posted a video today where he said that they paid for 1,400 people to stay in hotels, which is just remarkable. And I've talked to JP Decker, who is the director of Mercury One, I don't know, maybe like 10 times a day for the past 5 days, and just
Right.
being like, hey, look, we've got like this specific person. I mean, last night in particular was the craziest scenario because we're in direct contact with Tom Tillis's office,
Good. Yeah.
Senator Ted Budd's office. And last night, they were just texting us nonstop the names of people that were getting kicked out of hotels and their phone numbers and saying, can you help them? Because they knew that we would act faster than FEMA.
Right.
That's
So that
how crazy last night was.
no, it is crazy. And what happened with the initial end of the vouchers and people being kicked out is that there was enough ruckus raised online and enough outrage that FEMA said, oh yeah, we'll extend those for 2 days or something. The problem was that they extended them to like a Monday and then closed up shop for inclement weather in the meantime, so that everyone who's a family in a hotel room doesn't know what to do on Monday, doesn't know what happens after that, and no one can get in touch with anyone again. I think eventually North Carolina's senators convinced FEMA that, hey, we got to get some serious extension here. And it looks like it will go at least to Trump's inauguration, if not a little bit past that at this point. But it also seemed a little slow by North Carolina politicians to get eyes on this, particularly what the governor seems MIA on this. Am I mischaracterizing that? I don't think I am.
No. You're certainly not mischaracterizing it. And yeah, I think there was just a lack of total understanding of the scope and scale of the problem in the timeline in which it was occurring. So on Thursday, we got a bunch of people in our spreadsheet requesting help because they were getting kicked out of hotels. And then I turned on my computer, I saw that the local news was also interviewing people that were just freaking out about being kicked out of their hotel on what was supposed to be Saturday morning by FEMA. And so we would call all of these people and be like, oh my God, they haven't extended the hotel vouchers. And that's when I started raising the alarm online that like, we might have a serious problem here,
Yeah.
And I was grateful for the 24-hour extension from Saturday morning to Sunday morning. But then Diane Criswell gets on the news and was like, hey, anytime you want, you can go to a disaster relief center and get help. And I'm like, yo, you closed the disaster relief centers for the storm. Like, people can't go and get help there, and you're going to kick them out on a Sunday morning, and they can't even go to one of these centers and actually talk to someone in person. That is crazy. So then, they extended it another 48 hours. And of course, 48 hours later, we were in crisis mode yet again, and everyone's freaking out. They're going to get kicked out. And so, we all raised the alarm. And then at the very last minute, at 8:15 p.m., they said, okay, we're extending it until January 25th or something. And turns out, based on what Chuck Edwards said this morning, that FEMA didn't communicate that to the hotels. And that the online system that the hotels rely on for the vouchers didn't actually update that information. So that's why Senator Tillis's office started panicking yesterday, because they were getting dozens of people, and these are families with kids that we talked to yesterday, getting kicked out of hotels. And it was just a nightmare situation. And I thought, like, this would never occur, but it makes complete sense that if you wait till 8:15 p.m. at night, that someone's going to actually drop the ball on the FEMA side and not do good communication to the hotels. And we actually saw this on the first 24-hour extension. It just doesn't look like it was as widespread then as it is now.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where I can tell you're if you're a person of good faith and you assume that the, people in charge are working for the best of the citizens, you're like, good sense is going to prevail here, right? Like someone someone at FEMA is going to get the right message at the right time and will do the right thing. And this has just felt like not just a comedy of errors, because it's tragic, but it is almost beyond parody the kinds of errors they're making.
Yeah, if you talk to anyone here, they will tell you it feels intentional, not like a comedy of errors. That
Right.
just feels like super intentional, that they're just waiting till the very last second to give extensions, and then the extensions they are giving are just like 24 hours, 48 hours. Like, the families we talked to were just panicking every 24 to 48 hours because they didn't know when they were going to sleep the next day. That is crazy that the emergency management agency that we've got cannot get it together enough just to press one button to get hotel vouchers extended for these people. Like, if they're so bad at that, like, God only knows how bad it's been for the people trying to get real help and real money to like rebuild some of these homes that they're trying to get from FEMA.
Yeah.
It's just
I think, no, it's been shocking to watch, and partly, and I would love for your thoughts on, like, have you ever heard from any actual person from FEMA in doing this work?
I got the $750 pretty quick
Yeah.
from FEMA.
Okay.
Like, within a couple of weeks after I got internet, which again was like a couple of weeks after the storm. And then I submitted for my generator, and that took like another 2 months.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the only experience that I had with FEMA, but I have never once seen a person from FEMA anywhere.
Wow.
Never. And that is the reality of most people. I bet if you asked anyone in Western North Carolina, they would say they had not seen FEMA. There was one guy who said he saw FEMA running around with an iPad somewhere.
Yeah. What?
So,
You said, and I don't blame them at all for it saying it feels intentional. What do you make of the lack of attention from media, from politicians, from just the world on this?
I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot. I think, there's a lot of people in Western North Carolina that just have never trusted the government to come through for them based on past experience with how they've treated people in the mountains and people that are typically not super wealthy, not super famous. They live quiet lives, and, people on, let's just say, the West Coast or New York or wherever just don't understand the type of life that, people in the mountains want to live. And, I feel like a lot of people here don't think that they're actually cared about by the government.
Yeah.
And especially in this disaster, it just has felt like we've always been left behind or given the bare minimum attention, whether it was by the media, which, is crazy because we didn't have any communication. So we didn't really know that there was a lack of media attention here until much, much later. And it's become kind of like an interesting conversation started with everyone here, which was, did we get as much attention as LA got, on the media front? Because none of us had any, contact with the outside world for weeks. So, it's been kind of interesting comparing the two. But I would say that most people here feel like it's very intentional, that, the rural mountains for sure are very red, they're not blue. And people will tell you that they feel like that's probably one of the reasons we're not getting as much attention.
So there's a new governor, and he seems like, I'm trying to be polite about it or semi-diplomatic, but totally disengaged from this, to the point of, he's posting what restaurant he's at on his Twitter. What is going on there?
I don't know. I don't know. I obviously yelled about it a lot yesterday because, I mean, it's just beyond the pale when you are on the phone with a family of 3 kids under the age of 10 that are crying on the phone, not knowing whether they're going to sleep tomorrow. And the governor posts he's eating a barbecue sandwich. I mean, that was literally his post yesterday. And I was like, I cannot take this. Like, the tone-deaf nature, like, he clearly knows something's going on.
Yeah.
Both United States senators and members of Congress are posting about it. Like, it's happening. He knows it for sure. He just didn't seem to care enough to post that he actually is working on it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I also know from conversations with other people that it's actually up to the governor to request some of these FEMA voucher hotel extensions. FEMA can't just like automatically do them on its own. The governor has to request it. So whether it's FEMA's fault, whether they wait till 8:15 p.m. at night, could be the governor's fault.
Right.
For not submitting the request fast enough. I think someone needs to do some FOIA request or something to get these communications between the governor and FEMA, or FEMA internally, because it would be fascinating to know where the ball was dropped and who dropped it.
Yeah, because it seems like, the proof is in the pudding, and the governor's job is partly to keep an eye on this ball and to make sure that he's engaged in what's happening. And although resources have been turned toward keeping people in hotels, it should not have required an online uproar to make it happen. And, it shouldn't be lost in, although I love a good barbecue sandwich, I am from North Carolina, it shouldn't be lost in that kind of messaging when there's something very real and people really hurting in the mountains and have been for months. I mean, it's sort of amazing to me. I do think, by the way, on your question about media coverage, there's a useful metric, and I watch media constantly, which is, was there a major anchor in Western North Carolina at any time waiting in the water and reporting there? And I don't believe there was. I kept looking for Anderson Cooper to show up there, and he never did. And he was in LA within 24 hours. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's different.
I'll say this too, to that point. My wife, who works in film and media and has pitched CNN multiple projects, has contacts there at CNN, reached out to CNN multiple times to get them to cover some of the stuff that personal contacts, like phone numbers of people she knows and texts with decently regularly, and none of them ever wrote her back.
Ugh. Yeah, I think it drop balls all over the place, but as you note, drop balls aren't always unintentional, right? Like this is something, people's priorities are being illustrated here. And I'm glad to see that politicians are finally engaged. And I hope that I can do a little bit to get the word out too and to make things easier for you on the ground there. But I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, we can use some of the attention because, boy, we're not getting the help.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. I know I've taken up too much of it, but
happy to do so.
All right, cool. Thank you so much for your work, Matt. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care of those kiddos.
Will do.
All right, take care.